Hi.
Hi, I'm Ansel Eugene Ruppe. My dad's name was Rudolph Eugene Ruppe. I'm from Lafayette, Indiana. And
That's all right. You're from Lafayette, Indiana.
I'm from Lafayette, Indiana.
Where's your clan from?
All I can say is, for many years I did not know where my family existed from, and we was able to find out that they all originated from around Oakdale, Tennessee.
How did you find out?
I found out all about this. Just let me go through the whole thing.
Tell it.
Tell
it, brother.
Okay, the way we found out about this, it was in the year 2000, and Walt Disney World was having the Millennium Celebration. So we decided, I had some time, my wife and I decided to go down to Disney World to see the decorations. Well, coming back from Florida, there was snow up in the mountains in Tennessee, so we decided to take a different route home. We crossed into a little town called Phoenix City, Alabama, and many times I had traveled, I would get in the phone book, and maybe if I was lucky, I could locate a Ruppe, but I would call them, and they didn't know anything about it. But this time, when I called from Phoenix City, Alabama, I got hold of a John Ruppe, and come to find out, he was in Fort Benning, Georgia, in the military, and his wife answered the phone. I told her who I was.
What was her name?
Oh gosh, I can't remember.
That's
her
okay.
name.
That's okay.
I can't remember her name, but anyway, she said, well, her husband was in Fort Benning, and I mentioned about the Ruppe family. She said, well, I've heard, him talk about him down in Tennessee. So anyway, we got on home. It was kind of bad weather. We got on home, and 2 days later, I got a postcard from the Ruppe in Rockwood, Tennessee, and she was telling about the history of the Ruppe family, which we'll go into more. But it just so happens that gosh, I'm already running into trouble. It just so happens that.
Well, where was you? Where was all this? Where were they all from?
Well, the family, come to find out from Ruppe, she was kind of a historian. The family originated from a little town in Germany in the early 1800s, and what had happened, I guess, one of the daughters or something over there immigrated into Tennessee, and she worked as a housekeeper. And when she made enough money to send for her relatives, she sent and got the relatives coming back over from Germany.
Now, is this one of the guys that came over? This Frederick Ruppe?
This Frederick Ruppe would be one of the first ones that came over. And let's see.
He would be your great-grandfather?
He would be my great-great-grandfather.
Okay.
Okay.
So now he lived up in the hills of Tennessee also?
Yes. The Ruppe family settled in East Tennessee. It was near a little town called Wartburg. It was, I guess in Germany there was a town like that, had a big castle up in the mountains there. But anyway, that's where they originated from.
And then he had a child, probably by the name of?
Okay, this was Rudolph's father. His name was Henry Ruppe, and they live in Morgan County, Tennessee. Okay.
So he lived in a homestead up there.
Okay, as they immigrated into East Tennessee, kind of up in the mountainous area, they built the original homestead. It was a log cabin, and it still exists, and the land is owned by the Ruppe family now, and so the old homestead was still there. And it's still standing, and when I got into the family, they took me up there, and I got to walk into the old homestead place and examine it. And it's a beautiful country around there. And from there on, and we started finding out all these other cousins and brothers and everything that was in the Ruppe family that I never knew existed. I mean, if you want to really know the nitty-gritty there, my dad left Mom and I when I was 2 years old, and we never knew any Ruppes even existed. But now that's a change.
So they all lived in this house in Morgan County, Tennessee.
In the old log house there was, I think, a total of 10 or 11 kids. And the house is not all that big, but it was really interesting to actually go up into the house, walk across the floors where the fireplace was and the loft and stuff. I just can't imagine, 10 kids living in a house that small, but in those days, that was the way it went.
And so your grandfather, his son would be?
My grandfather's son was Rudolph Eugene Ruppe. Okay, And he was born in 1898, I think it was December of 1898. And all through the years there, he lived around that area there. Well, of course, times were pretty tough, and there was no industry to speak of, so my dad actually started out making moonshine, and he sold that to various people, and he was kind of a different guy, which you would consider a mountain man, because he would sell the moonshine, but he wouldn't allow him to drink it on his property. And then later on, and it was really odd too, being a moonshiner, he didn't smoke or drink, but he had a talent for very precise ways of doing things, and he made many musical instruments. I have a banjo in my possession, which I have turned over to Mike since he's the next heir, and he made that in approximately 1920. Now, in those days, there was no mechanical tools, electric tools, and things like that, so they actually took a truck spring out of an old truck, and he heated it in a forge, made it round, and welded it back together in the forge, and then he proceeded to form the neck and stuff. Now, he was very precise on what he did. He went out into the woods and he found a maple tree that had the wood grain that he wanted, and he made the neck out of that, and then somehow he was able to make all the veneer out of different things that he wanted. And
so this is the banjo right here that he made?
This is the banjo that he made. Obviously, today's guys wouldn't want to play this thing because it's extremely heavy. Now, the inlaid pearl and stuff there was made out of oyster shells, and how that man was able to cut them down and form them like he did. And there was a story going around that I learned that while he was making these oyster shells, they had chickens running around on the farm, and a chicken ate the oyster shells that he was going to make the inlay. So needless to say, they had to kill the chicken to get the oyster shells back. So the only thing that he had to buy on this thing was the thing that holds the strings on, and the drum part of it, that they call it, was supposed to have been made out of the hide of a raccoon. And that's where they get the tone and stuff.
How heavy do you think that banjo is?
I think I weighted it's 15-20 pounds. It's a lot heavier than modern stuff. My dad was an extremely perfectionist, and over the years, I never knew this because I never knew the man, but it ended up that I'm the same way, and thank goodness, I've passed that along to Mike, and
yes.
He's a chip off the old block yet. He's a perfectionist, so thank God for that. There's something good from the Ruppes.
Now, your mother, her name was?
Okay, Mom and my folks and all, we lived in Lafayette, Indiana in the early 30s, and my grandfather, Gene was in Lafayette, Indiana in 1935 and made some musical instruments and stuff, and the reputation was he played around the local areas there and was very good, but he decided to leave us in about 1936 or 7.
What was the name of his band?
His band was called Gene Ruppe and the Cumberland Ridge Runners. And I have in my possession a mandolin he made in Lafayette, Indiana in 1935. And he also later on went up to WLS in Chicago and played up there. And his band was called the Cumberland Ridge Runners, and Red Foley was the lead singer in his band.
Wow.
And that's quite an important person nowadays. But he played there, and Mom also had musical talent. She played the guitar and stuff, and she played in local places around Lafayette, Indiana, and over the radio and morning programs. And they had special events at Jeff High School that they attended and played music there.
Now, what year were you born?
I was born January 25th, 1936.
And how long did you see your dad before he went on his way?
When I was about 6 months old, we have some pictures here. My dad had actually made a little miniature banjo, fully workable, and I have pictures of that when I was about 6 months old, holding it in a rocking chair. I somehow, over the years, got away from my possession. But anyway, after he left us, and he went on into Cincinnati, Ohio, and he played music down there on WCKY. And in the meantime, when you get back to the local people there in Tennessee, there was a people named the Binghams, and they had several daughters, and my dad, that was Ollie Bingham, was his half-sister. Well, they were all very talented, and I guess in 1935, before I was born, Gene was down there, and Mom and Dad have pictures there, and the Bingham girls, and they were all playing music and things like that, and I was able And later on, when I found the family, to find a lady that knew when I was down there in 1935, before I was born, she remembers seeing me, and she remembers my dad and all the things down there, and we still have pictures of that lady.
The family up there in Tennessee, the picture we have here, it looks like there's a lot of relatives there. There's a guy by the name of John Ruppe, Skip Ruppe, Tom Ruppe, and we have an Aunt Jody, Louise Ruppe, and Hazel Faye Ruppe. Now, who are they?
They were all daughters and relatives of the John Ruppe there in the old home place.
I got you. So your dad went into a musician band, and so what was the name of the band again?
Well, Gene, so the story goes that he actually, when he was playing around Cincinnati, there was a place in Kentucky called Renfrew Valley. A guy by the name of John Laird, he was a kind of a big shot down there, and it was an insurance company. So John Laird decided that when they branched out, they were going to go to Chicago, and that when he got up there, he thought for entertainment that they should have some mountain music. So John Laird had my dad come up there, and that's where they played over WLS in Chicago for several years.
Well, this particular picture that we're looking at, the gentleman that's holding the fiddle, that's your dad.
That's my dad, yes. Now, a little more history on my dad. I mean, he was very talented, but in his younger days, he was kind of like some of these modern kids. He was a little bit of a wiseacre, and he was attempting to hop a freight train, bragging to his buddies. He was about 15 at the time. He was going to hop this freight train and show them how smart he was. Well, he misjudged and went under the freight train and had his left lower leg cut off. And they were 30 miles from the nearest town, so it was amazing that the man was able to survive that. And then all through the rest of his life, he actually handmade his own, wooden leg and things like that. But then when he did get up into Chicago, and they had the band up there, and he was playing over WLS, and like I said, very fully as a singer. But then in the mid-30s, I take that back, it was in the late 30s, he wandered away from Chicago. Well, later in life, we learned that he had other things to do, and he just kind of went down, and he came through Lafayette, and that's how he got acquainted with my mom. And then next thing you know, I came along, and then later on, when he did Vegas, he went on to Cincinnati, Ohio, and he played down there. He was living in Cincinnati at the time of his death.
Now, he died in what year would that be?
He died in, I think it was December of 1940.
40, yeah.
And it was a little story behind that.
It wasn't a cold or anything he died from?
No. We had heard different stories of what had happened to him, but nobody could confirm it. But as far as we know, the last lady that he was with, he died of a heart attack. Now, this is also kind of strange, too. They had to take him back to Tennessee to be buried. They shipped him back on a train. Well, the train was delayed. They didn't get into Tennessee until the evening. Normally in the South, and I presume that's pretty characteristic, you don't bury people after dark. But anyway, some of the relatives, they got up to the site where he was buried. He's buried up around a little church in Oakdale. And as they was digging the grave, they ran across a casket of an older woman and scared the guys digging, but they did finally get him buried there at night. And to this day, he's still, on the hillside there in the little church right near Oakdale, Tennessee.
Well, your mom and dad, while they were together, did a lot of singing, ran into a lot of people, and throughout the years they met some interesting musicians and singers, I take it.
Yeah, they was all very musically inclined, and the word was that before I was born, my dad came back to Tennessee with Mom, and in those days, in the mountains and the hills and the hollers, they drove the car as far as they could, and then they had to walk. Well, to get across some of the hollers, they had just cut a pine tree down, and it straddled the little hollow there, and they had to walk across that to get up to the old Bingham house. And this Bingham house, it was George and Ollie Bingham. They had several daughters, and for some reason, my dad was, Ollie was his favorite, relative, half-sister. So anyway, that Mom remembers when they came down there, it was kind of late, but the kids slept up in the loft. Well, when they came in, they got the kids down, and my dad and Mom was saying, well, the girls were probably in their teens there. They come down there and stood in front of the fireplace and sang country songs, and they really had a great time. So that's how the Binghams came in.
And this picture that shows your dad, and who's that with him?
Okay, this picture right here, after my dad left us, that he was around the Cincinnati, Ohio area, and he ended up with this last lady here, and they had 2 children. And at the time of his death, this lady had a 6-month-old daughter, Minerva, and she was pregnant with a boy who ended up being Tommy Jean.
Yeah.
And from there, then, of course, I guess the word was,
So that's one of your brothers.
yeah, that's one of my half-brother and half-sister, Minerva,
Yeah.
and Tommy Jean. Now, the thing was that nobody really knew what the situation was, how he died and stuff, and really I had never learned anything at all about my family because there was just something, after he left us. The only memory I ever had of my dad was we was living on South 3rd Street in Lafayette, Indiana. I was probably maybe 6 months to a year old, and I remember my grandfather telling me to shut up and go upstairs. And I had an image of a man turning his back and walking away. That was the only memory I ever had of my dad at all. I never even knew anything about it, and Mom was kind of hurt when he deserted us, so she never did talk about it. In turn, I wished I would have been able to talk to her more about it. Now, the thing I did learn, that I actually, the guy that knew my dad, I was in the hospital recovering from open heart surgery, and I was in the room before they dismissed you. The nurse came in and says, Mr. Ruppe, you'll be going home here in about a half hour. There was another gentleman sitting over there on the area visiting, and another old fellow was there. And when the nurse went out of the room, he looked over at me and he says, "Are you any relation to Gene Ruppe?" I said, "Yes, sir." I said, "I'm his son." He says, "My God," he said, "I played music with that man in the old days there. We was in a contest," and he said, "That man was a musician." He said, "He just beat me hands down." But that was the only time that I had ever known anybody at all that knew the man. So anyway, the way we actually found the family then, it was in the year 2000 in December, and Walt Disney World was having their Millennium decorations. So in December, Claire and I decided to go down in December and see the Millenniums before they took all this stuff down. So what we did, we went on down there, and we were starting to come back, it was kind of getting bad weather, so we ended up coming up through Georgia, and then we crossed over to a little town called Phoenix City, Alabama, and because there was snow forecast in the mountains. So anyway, as usual, I got the phone book out, and I located a John Ruppe. Okay, I ended up calling in, and his wife answered the phone and said, well, John was in the military there in Fort Benning, and he had heard of him talk about the rallies and being up around Oakdale, Tennessee. So she said that she would, notify him. So we went ahead and got home, and it snowy all the way back to Indiana. 2 days later, we got a card in the mail, and Claire went out to get it, and I was running the snowblower trying to clear the walks. She said, "You better come in and look at this card." And what it was a postcard from a Ruppe Ruppe on Ruppe Ruppe Road in Rockwood, Tennessee. And inside the card there, she made a notation, "Did you know that you had a brother that's 83 years old?" And I said, "No, I had no idea." So what they ended up, I was trying to think how that happened. They ended up Mildred's.
Getting a hold of Mildred. They were getting hold of Mildred and Paul.
Yeah, Mildred and Paul wanted more information on it, and somehow they ended up getting my phone number. So it was a Christmas Day then. I was down in the basement there, and the phone rang, and this guy says, "Hello, I think I'm your brother." Well, come to find out, it was my brother Paul Ruppe, and he got to asking me, and he says, "Now, did you have a brother and a sister?" And I said, "No." And so he says, "Well, let me call you back."
So how many brothers and sisters did you end up finding out?
Well, when we got back there, there was 5 brothers and sisters. And over a period of years, most of them are deceased. But anyway, there were still a few of them living there in Wartburg, Tennessee. So yeah. My sister-in-law broke in on the phone and says, "Well, our health is not that good." She said, "You guys better come down and visit it as soon as you can," because every July 4th they had the Ruppe reunion down there in Tennessee, and it was around Oakdale. So she said, okay, we had some time, so we decided to hop in the car and we headed to Tennessee, and we got down there and finally found Paul and Mildred, and good grief, he started taking me around to all these rallies and stuff, and I found that I had cousins all over the place down there, and they were right in the definitely down in the mountains. And
Now this picture right here, is this a lot of the people that were from up there?
yes, this was lots and lots of the relatives. A lot of them, you know, I never got to meet. But the thing was, by the time that we had really got into that area, I was trying to think now. I think what it was, they wanted to take us around. Of course, everybody wanted to see this last Ruppe kid.
Yeah.
So it was kind of funny. So anyway, my brother started taking us around all the different relatives, and we got to hear all kinds of stories from things that had happened down there in Tennessee. And maybe I shouldn't say this, but when I found Ruth Ruppe, she's the one that's kind of a historian and had a lot of information. Well, anyway, I got to talking to her. Of course, I guess all my life I was a little bit of a BS guy, you know, and I told her, you know, how much younger she looked, and I thought, and she said, well, you're a Ruppe, all right. So anyway, she put us in touch with different people, and we'd go down there, and I tell you, it was like I was John the Baptist. Them guys came out of the hills down there. We had to meet all the relatives, and every house we went to, you had to eat. Everybody had musical instruments and knew the history of the family. And from there on, this just blossomed into a thing that we go down every year, and it's just fantastic. And all the family down there was really great about walking with us, and they took care of us just like we were born and raised here. I mean, I guess kinfolk's pretty thick in that part of the country.
This picture right here has you, your dad and mom together.
Yeah, this picture here was made in probably 1935, and that's a picture of my dad. And I'm not sure who the little girl was. And the mom was there. She had a guitar and played music, and this was just some of the Bingham people.
Yeah, now again, he not only did he make banjos, but he made all kinds of other instruments. But you know these girls here?
The Binghams.
Are those the Binghams?
These are the Bingham, some of the Bingham girls. And George and Ollie Bingham lived not too far away from it's not on the mountains down there. They was not too far away from the original homestead. And as I eventually got to meet them, one of my cousins, this Al Smith, he was kind of a historical guy too. And he took us up to the old Bingham home place where Mom had been in those days. There was nothing left but the fireplace.
Oh.
But he showed us around there, and surprisingly, there was they had a dug well, open well, up on the mountain. I don't understand how the water could still be there, but it still had water in it. Well, Al Smith, he said, why don't we take some water here? And he took a grapevine, and it was laying there, and it was a small one, and he found an old pop can, he punctured it, dipped it down in the well, and he took that water back, and he said, now my mom at that time was in a nursing home. He says, take this back to your water back to your mom and tell her that that water came from Ollie Bingham's well. And she was really surprised because she had been there with my dad in 1935.
That's amazing. Can you tell me who that is?
Okay, this was me when I was probably about 6 months old.
And you said that your dad made a lot of instruments.
Okay, now when he was in Indiana with us, I don't really know how long he was there. As usual, probably not more than 2 years, but he was a super talented person, and he made this little, about a half-size banjo, which is fully functional. And that's a picture of me sitting in a rocking chair with it.
Yeah. Is this your first cart?
Well, this is my first stroller. I was a chubby little booger.
Some of these pictures, you just have to explain as we go.
After my dad left us, thank God I had a wonderful grandfather. His name was William Cole, and my grandmother. We were living on South 4th Street there in Lafayette. Well, come Christmas time, you know, I mean, he just showered us with gifts and everything that you know, I would have not been able to do because, you know, Mom didn't have a lot of money. But I remember him there at that particular house. It was on South 4th Street, and I think it was in October of 1940, I believe it was, that he passed away. And so then after that, Mom and my grandmother, they had to, you know, just take care of raising us. Well, my grandfather had worked for the Crown Laundry down there for years and years, so since he had worked there so long and so good, they gave Mom a job, and she worked in the Crown Laundry for years until she retired. And that's
your...
Okay, then this picture here is me, and on my grandfather's side, this boy here, young boy, was named Bob Cole. And my grandfather was William Cole, and they had originally came up from Tennessee. And we had Bob Cole, and he had a sister Betty, and this was getting towards the 40s, late 40s, and the war was blurring. So he enlisted in the Army Air Force, and his sister Betty, there in Lafayette, she was living with us for a while. And they had, during the war effort, they had a USO building down the corner of 4th and South Street. And in those days, the Purdue was a big aviation training center. So a lot of the students, lived around there, and they'd come down to this USO, to do their diamond dance things that they did during World War II. And it was an interesting time for him because in that time, about 1940, 42, the war was going so bad that we really thought that we were, the U.S. might be invaded. And I remember going through the blackouts and rationing and everything like that, but the kids nowadays don't have the foggiest idea of what we went through.
No, not at all.
This picture here was me when I was probably, I don't know, 8, 9 years old. Okay, now this is also was taken right close to the war years. And in those days, everything was rationed. You could no longer get metal toys or anything like that. So we didn't have a lot of money. My mom got me a Tinker toy set, which is, just wood and sticks. And I didn't know anything, but I had the ability to try to piece things together. So I guess what I understand, my dad was an absolute perfectionist, and I didn't have anybody to guide me, but I did inherit that. And thank God I was able to pass that along to my son Mike. So we're kind of a chip off the old blockhead. That was me in a sailor suit there.
Yeah.
I was 6 years old at that age. And I'm not sure how old I was in this one here, but it was out near the farm, I think.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't have the date on this picture here, but when my dad died, they had a 1923 Studebaker. I believe that's in the background. And of course, during the war years, you couldn't get much gas. We had an A sticker, and you could only get like a couple of gallons or something. And so that was one of the first cars I ever remember riding in. Well, this was after my dad had left us, and I was on South 3rd Street there next to the old Tippecanoe School. That was my first Christmas. Needless to say, my grandfather made darn sure I was spoiled rotten.
You were.
He'd get me all kinds of toys and stuff. This was my first ha-ha scooter. It was kind of different than what the kids go now. It had like, I think, 12-inch wheels on it, but it was a little pedal scooter.
Now, where was this picture taken at?
Okay, this picture right here was taken in Nashville, Tennessee in 1965. We were on the steps of the Grand Ole Opry, the Ryman Auditorium there. So in '65, I would have been, what, 19, 20 years old. Mm-hmm. And later on, as we did find out, pictures of my dad and kind of opened up, I did end up being the spitting image of him.
Absolutely.
Okay, then after I got out of school in '54, I was basically, I didn't have any mechanical ability, but I knew how to do things. So
and a sharp dresser too.
Yeah, this was one of my first cars. This was also in '54, and gosh, I was skinny in those days. Big change. I was always tinkering with cars and building cars. I never had enough money to buy a new car, so I obviously would drag cars out of the junkyard and rebuild them myself.
Now this is your...
Okay, this picture here was made in '56, and I worked for Glen Auto Electric. And this, when Mom remarried in, I think it was '46, I had a half brother named Rory Edward. And so there's about 10 years difference in our ages there.
Now this particular car was special to you, wasn't it?
This car here was really special. At that time period, I was, definitely getting to be a halfway decent mechanic, and I wanted to build me a hot rod. So I dragged this car out of a junkyard, and I took and built the engine up. I went and got the V8 motor, tore it down completely, and I had it rebuilt and put all kinds of hot rodding stuff on it. I had Offenhauser heads, dual carburetors, dual exhaust. Made a pretty spunky little car out of it.
And you were always working on something.
I was always working on something. This was a picture of my first pickup truck. It was a 1950 Ford F2, and I was always trying to make things prettier. I mean, I guess that was kind of a hillbilly. I mean, I had everything I had to do had to be extra add-on gadgets. The more chrome and the shiny stuff, that's what rednecks like.
Of course.
And this was another car, another one I pulled out of the junkyard. This was a '51 Ford convertible. It had been wrecked in the front end. It only had 23,000 miles on it. And I dragged the thing out of the junkyard and fixed it all up and made a pretty nice car out of it. Later on in life, then, after Mike and I, Mike's mom and I divorced, I ended up starting dating a nice young lady named Clara Lyman at the time. She had 2 little girls, was 3 and 5 when we got married. So this is a picture of Mike and Cindy and then Clara's 2 girls. And that was a car behind that was another car I fixed up and painted. Okay, this picture here was made in 1961. Clara and I had just started going together. Can't believe I was that young. Very good looking woman though, I must have caught her all right.
Yes, you did. Now this is later.
Okay, now this is later in life when we finally found the family there in Tennessee. And this was my brother Paul, the one that Ruth had told me about. And then this, after we got to know Paul, he knew that there was 2 other possible kids, but he didn't know where they was. So he was always interested in if he could try to find those last 2 kids. Well, Clara got on the computer and she started finding phone numbers and things like that. By that time, Mom was in the nursing home up there, but I'd go visit her every night. And one night I came home over there and she was practically doing cartwheels. So, hey, I got some phone numbers about these kids. Well, I called. What was that? She found some phone numbers, and I called a couple people, and told them who I was, and they said, well, we don't know anything, blah 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 like that. Well, anyway, finally then, when we got hold of this last person, called up, and I found out that yes, there was another 2 kids, and we ended up getting to get together in Tennessee and meet them. So finally, we all got together there, and this was the last 2 children that Gene Ruppe fathered. This was Tommy Eugene, everybody was Eugene. Tommy Eugene on the left there, and me in the middle, and my brother Paul, and then the half-sister Minerva. Okay. And the 1 year after we found each other, we all got together at the Ruppe reunion. It was in a little town near Wartburg, Tennessee. They had a state park there called Frozen Head State Park. Very, very nice place. So we got the family. We had the last 2 kids came up from. They lived in Oldsmar, Florida, and they came up and got to meet the family. So that was all the family there at the Frozen Head State Park. Now this picture here is some of Gene's kids that was way before me, and most of them are already deceased. And my brother Paul, who's on the left now, he's also deceased now. Now this was Tommy Eugene Ruppe? Tommy Eugene, I was thinking that's right. Everybody was called Eugene. That was his wife, Karen. Really super nice people. They live in Oldsmar, Florida. Now, Tommy is the same way as the rest of the Ruppes are. He's an absolute genius and perfectionist on doing things. And he run a business down there where they did roofing and guttering. And he made his own machinery to cut out these metal shingles, and he also did copper guttering. He was telling me one time down there that he did a guttering job on a house for some football player or something, and just the bill on the guttering was $83,000. That's a lot of money, and he showed me sheets of copper he had in there, 4 by 8 sheets of copper. Probably there was 30 of them, so that's worth a ton of money.
A ton of money.
Okay, now this picture here, as I told you about finding the family, this lady on the right is Ruth Ruppe. She's the one that really put us in touch with each other. There's some history going in that one there too, but her maiden name was Hatfield. So everybody knows of the famous Hatfield and McCoy feud down in the South there. Well, she was a 2nd generation Hatfield. And the guy on the other side of me there, he was the grandson that I contacted in Fort Benning, and he's what helped get us together.
You're talking about the Hatfield and the McCoys?
Yes.
So, our family has a lot of history in it.
There's a lot of history. Now, also, as the kids got older and stuff, and they'd immigrated from Germany, many of them branched out into different states, Texas and Oklahoma. The way I understand this one here, there was a farm there in Oklahoma, and anyway, when they put the turnpike through there, they had to cut the farm in half. So they ended up, by doing that, they had to make an access road there to the Ruppe farm. So this is my cousin Raymond, and he went out there to visit him. So to this day, there is a Ruth Ruppe Road exit in Oklahoma.
And there is a Ruppe Road in Tennessee.
Oh yes,
Yeah.
lots of them.
So that's about basically the history. There'll probably be more to come. And you are?
Yeah, I'm Ansel Ruppe,
And I'm Mike Ruppe, the
Mike
son.
is my
And
son, and it's really interesting how to know that Mike is such an absolute chip off the old block, I guess, because even when he was little, he had a knack for taking things apart.
I sure did.
And needless to say, he used to take our daughter's pencils and stuff apart to get the springs out of them to put in model cars he was building. And fantastic kid, but he was a little ornery at the time.
There I am. Well, thank you for your time, and that's it for us, the Ruppies.